Alright guys, so in the post-election autopsy period that we find ourselves in right now, you're getting a lot of really interesting takes. I think a lot of them are wrong, and a few of them are actually hitting the nail on the head. So I wanted to put in my 2 cents of what I think actually happened, and I'm going to suffer through this one as well. It's like, why hasn't he put out any videos anymore? Well, for one, my voice is shot, and it still is. But I've also just been super busy. So, in the post-election, what did we learn? So, Republicans, I think one of the most interesting things that I saw in terms of, like, exit polling is that Trump didn't win over any new voters, okay? And that wasn't the strategy. If you remember, they were doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on what the right-wing red meat base wanted, which is like, you know, we're going to be super, super hawkish on the border, on immigration. Trump objectively ran a terrible campaign, in my opinion, because he was talking about, like, immigrants eating cats and dogs. Like, he was talking about complete and utter nonsense. He was talking about Hannibal Lecter. So, the thing is, like, if you look at the numbers, in 2020, Trump ended up with, like, a little over 74 million votes, I think it was. And then this time around, he got, like, I don't know if the vote count is completely finalized yet, but he got, like, maybe 500,000 more votes than he did in 2020. So it's like Trump got 74 million in 2020, and then he got a little over 74 million, maybe closer to 75 million in 2024. So essentially almost the same number. He might have increased his vote share by 500,000 or so. The same number of people that voted for Biden in 2020 did not show up for Kamala Harris. So I've pointed this out on the show multiple times before. One of the reasons why Republicans are very adamant about voter suppression, about complaining about illegal votes, about purging voter rolls, about making it harder to vote, about complaining about mail-in ballots and drop boxes and all of this stuff, they're very, very adamant about gerrymandering, is because they know for a fact that when turnout is low, it favors Republicans. And when turnout is high, it favors Democrats in elections. So this time around, Republicans turned out pretty much the same number as 2020 for Donald Trump, which is what you would expect. The red meat base absolutely turned out for Donald Trump. And the Democrats did not turn up for Kamala Harris in the same way that they didn't turn up for Hillary Clinton. Now, the other thing that I thought was super, super interesting is that you had an exit poll that was a blind poll that basically was just policy and not attributing the policy to either candidate and just saying, hey, which policy do you prefer? And Kamala Harris's policy won 80% of the time, which means in 8 out of 10 policies that you put forward as just a blind, hey, here's a policy, do you like it or not? The Democrats' agenda for 2024, as stated, won. And so this gives me a tiny bit of, I guess, vindication, because I was like, objectively, Trump is running on garbage. Like, he's running on absolute trash. Like, he hasn't changed his story at all since 2016. In fact, he's gotten worse since 2016. At least he had a little bit of economic populism in 2016. Come 2020, he was running basically on everything is great, let's keep it great. And I'm going to continue to be extremely racist and extremely hawkish on the border, and I'm going to continue to cut taxes for the ultra wealthy, and all of this nonsense. Okay, so the policy won, but what this tells you is it's not the policy that matters. In fact, what Trump has kind of proven twice now is that you don't have to be a politician in like the sense that most people think of a politician. You don't have to be a polished, professional. You can be an unhinged, insane megalomaniac. You can be a racist. You can be a sexist. You can be a bigot. You can say all kinds of insane things and still win an election. So why did he win? My main thing that I've seen, and this happened all over the world, is that we had a cycle of anti-incumbency. Whoever was in power post-pandemic got punished. And a lot of it is because most of the world is run by neoliberals who are status quo managers. And what Trump promised, even though he governed exactly like a standard issue Republican when he was in office, the story that he told people is, hey, I'm different. I'm going to change all of this stuff. I'm going to drain the swamp, as he famously put more billionaires in his administration than any other president in the history of the country. So if you bought that the first time around and you bought that the second time around, I got news to tell you. It's going to be a lot more of the same. People are going to realize that they don't really like Trump's policy, but what he promised was to be radically different. The other thing that I've seen a lot of is that he has a good story to back all of the things that he's saying, even though it's categorically not true. So what do I mean by that? It's like, I'm going to change everything. Everything is terrible. The United States is horrible. Everyone's laughing at us. We don't have the jobs anymore. Nobody has money anymore. We're not producing anything anymore. And oh, by the way, it's the fault of the immigrants. It's the fault of the cultural elite. I mean, Trump was at the end of his run, this time around, was talking about migrants eating pets. He was talking about trans boxers in the Olympics. I mean, just absolutely insane stuff. But what the Democrats were running on, even though it's like, yes, Biden did accomplish good things, economically speaking, during his term, the people have to actually feel that. And a lot of the things that happen with economic policy, it's not really felt. Like there's a latent effect. And so it's not really felt until years afterwards. So it's like jobs were created under the Biden administration. Like they brought back over 800,000 manufacturing jobs. That part is true. Things like the Inflation Reduction Act actually worked. We did bring down inflation. The problem is that they weren't bringing up wages at the same time. So it's like, well, inflation is down year over year. People are still pissed because they're getting paid nowhere near as much as they should be to keep up with the prices. And so it's like, yeah, inflation's down, but prices are up 25% in the last 4 years. And then like being just technocrats and telling people like, well, GDP is good and the jobs are good and the unemployment is down. And it's like, yeah, that sounds great. But like, if people don't feel that in their wallet, if they don't feel that in their bank account, they're going to be pissed still. And so, I would say one of the major mistakes was, saying those things. The other thing was just not having a good narrative. And I think that that's going to be the hardest one for the Democrats to kick, because they're wholly bought and owned by the donor class. And what I mean is, if you don't have the proper counter narrative to the bullshit Trump narrative, then people are going to buy the shit that he's selling. What I mean is, it's like people have lost purchasing power and people don't have the American dream anymore because Wall Street is buying up homes at an alarming clip, like single-family homes. And so part of what Kamala was talking about in terms of policy was to give people down payment assistance and to build more houses so that the supply is higher. I think part of that policy, although I don't really remember, I think part of that policy was that you ban Wall Street and big investment firms from buying up single-family homes. But again, it's like, if that's the part that you're focused on, people don't hear that. And that post-election poll really proves that policy is not at the forefront of what people are actually voting on. Most of what they're voting on is they're punishing the party in power because they don't feel like anything has changed. And honestly, like, the last chance that the Democrats had of really countering this ridiculous narrative on the right that has won twice now is they snubbed Bernie twice. The Democrats cared more about beating Bernie Sanders and making sure that Bernie did not win. They cared more about that than they did about beating Trump and beating the Republicans. And Bernie was the last one that... Sorry, I have to readjust. Bernie was the last one that not only had the correct policy agenda, like, hey, we're going to do Medicare for all, we're going to do a minimum $15 an hour federal minimum wage, we're going to give everybody health care, we're going to do, free public college, stuff like that. And that was an economic agenda that everybody loved and wanted. And the Democrats made sure that that got defeated. In 2016, the DNC conspired against Bernie. Hillary lost. Debbie Wasserman Schultz had to step down as DNC chair. I mean, like, they cheated like crazy in 2016. And they put in Hillary Clinton, who is a neoliberal, corporate, centrist, status quo manager. And guess what? She lost to Trump. Now, the reason the pendulum swung the other way in 2020 is because Trump had just done a horrible job managing the pandemic. I think if the pandemic didn't happen, Trump probably would have won in 2020. But you don't have a pandemic this time around. And so, you've got, again, a neoliberal, corporate, centrist, status quo manager in Joe Biden, who stayed in the race for far too long. And I put a lot of the blame on Joe Biden for staying in the race and not stepping down sooner. But he pretty much anointed Kamala Harris to be his replacement. And the party fell in line because they didn't want to deal with, having a giant fight in public about who was going to replace him. And Kamala Harris is a neoliberal, corporate, centrist, status quo manager. So the lesson that I think the Democrats need to learn is twofold. One, the era of neoliberalism, the era of tweaks around the edges is over. And as long as you continue this campaign of, we're going to tweak the status quo, we're going to do, little fixes around the edges, we're going to do band-aids over shotgun wounds, you're going to continue to lose elections. Like, The Republican Party, the fact that the Republican Party is a viable party in this day and age is baffling to me, because their agenda is horrible. If you just pull issues about what the Republicans have been running on, nobody likes what they're selling. But again, and this comes back to that exit poll of like, hey, which policy do you prefer? 80% of the time, people preferred the Democrats' policy. They preferred Kamala Harris's policy over Trump's. So it's a failing of the media that people don't know. It's a failing of the voters that they don't fucking read or actually, figure out any of this stuff. But it's a failure of the Democrats because, like, you're not messaging on the correct stuff to actually win. You're doing the correct policy. Like, I think objectively doing, something with real estate, down payment assistance, increasing the child tax credit to $6,000 per kid for new parents. I think that's great. I think that's awesome. Did enough people know about that? Probably not. And that's a failing of the media, and that's a failing of voters to actually have any kind of media literacy and go out and find that out. But they also don't have the narrative. And this is the thing that I said, from before, is that, like, for all of the stupid shit that Trump says, he is relentless on the messaging of, like, we're going to deport illegal immigrants, they're criminals, they're rapists, they're stealing people's jobs, blah, 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 okay? But he has a defined message of, here's all the things that are wrong, and here's where I'm laying the blame, okay? And what the Democrats have failed to do is they've said, hey, look, these are the things that we're going to do. Okay, that's one part of the equation. But it's not, this is why things are the way they are, and this is why you should trust us to get us out of this mess. And the biggest part of that is not putting the blame squarely on the billionaires that fund their campaigns, which is why they're going to continue to lose. Is if the Democrats cannot break with the donor class, which is the corporate elites, it's the ultra wealthy, they're not going to be able to win, because that was what Bernie ran on, and that's what organically popped up in 2016 and got him all the way to almost beating Hillary Clinton. And if the Democratic Party didn't shiv Bernie in 2016, we probably would have never had Trump. But Bernie had the correct policy agenda, and Bernie had the correct narrative. He's like, the reason that everything is bad is because the billionaires own our government, and they have the ability to curry favor with politicians because they fund the campaigns of these politicians, and they're not paying their fair share in taxes, so they pocket more and more and more and more of the money. They create a giant wealth disparity between the working class and themselves. And effectively what happens is you do have an oligarchy. You have a party that, you have a group of people that can effectively buy policy from either party. And until the Democrats are able to separate themselves from that money and do what Bernie did, which was rely solely on small dollar donations pretty much, you're just going to keep seeing this pendulum swing back and forth. People are going to realize as soon as Trump gets in there that they fucking hate Trump, because everybody realized that the first time around. Nobody really liked the Trump show. I mean, yes, it's entertaining to watch him, go out there and like lie about the direction of hurricanes and redraw on a map with a Sharpie or whatever. Like, he's entertaining. The problem is that, he got taken seriously. He's a joke. Trump is a fucking laughing stock. But the fact that the Democrats are losing to that is a serious indictment of the Democrats, and they need to be doing a lot of, soul searching, I guess, or whatever. They need to do a serious autopsy. And I've seen a couple of people come away with the right conclusion. Apparently, Jen Psaki was like, hey, maybe we shouldn't have leaned into the whole, like, Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney endorsements so much. Maybe we should have tried harder to go after the Democrats who left the party, the voters who left the party. I've seen a couple of people say, yeah, maybe Bernie was right, which is crazy because, like, it's only after the fact that the Democrats did everything in their power to shiv Bernie twice, to make sure that Bernie and the Democratic Socialist, whatever he called it, more like a social democracy, but like to make sure that the policies and the movement that he started got no foothold in the United States government and no foothold in the Democratic Party. And what happened this time around is you didn't have Kamala Harris talking about Medicare for all. We didn't even hear about a public option. Okay, that was like the number one issue in 2020. I think it was the number one issue in 2016. Nothing. And we didn't hear about how, you've got all of these, these lobbyists, these big money donors buying the party. You didn't hear about any of that. There was a little bit of talk about price gouging and stopping corporate greed. But like, you have to really, really, really hammer that home and make it constant. Like, hey, the reason that things suck is because of the way that the system is now. And I'm going to upend the system. That's what Bernie talked about. That's what Trump talked about. Trump, we already know, didn't upend the system. I mean, he ruined a lot of things, but he didn't upend the actual system of how people buy politicians, how the government is run. So, yeah, I mean, that's my 2 cents. I think that if you had to boil it down to one real thing, this election was an anti-incumbency election, and the base didn't show up for Kamala. And the reason that Trump won is that the red meat base for the Republicans showed up in the same numbers that they showed up for in 2020, and they didn't show up for Kamala Harris. And that's another problem that the Democrats need to contend with, is that maybe even if we did some good things on the economy, even if certain things went okay, you have to own up to the fact that, like, it's not winning voters. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. I'll try and do a couple more videos. I'm about to travel for work again, so we'll see what I can do. Try and get my voice to try and get my voice to heal a little bit. I appreciate you guys. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you thought that that's what happened. Like I said, I think that the statistics are pretty clear in that, the policy is not what actually mattered this election. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.